So welcome to 13 Minutes Why Every Man Needs a Why. My new friend, Wally Klatch. Honor and privilege to have you here.
It's a privilege and very strong happiness that we're connected, yes.
Now, my listeners are going to be in for quite a ride today because I'm sitting across from a man who has quite a story. And let me just, give a little context, even though probably most people listening know, but started this podcast in response to a tragic statistic that every 13 minutes in America, a man chooses to die by suicide. And I believe, as my mentor and teacher, Viktor Frankl, taught, he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. And when a man has a why, he's got a way forward. And yet you are going to challenge some of those assumptions today, but you're also going to reinforce other parts of these teachings. And I know it's going to be a very courageous and impactful conversation. And I'm really excited for my audience to meet you.
Whatever we can do that may help somebody, then here, that's it. That's the mission that you're helping me, and you're keeping me alive by allowing me to have this conversation.
Well, let's elaborate on it. Thank you. Let's elaborate on that because I think our listeners probably have never heard a story quite like this. As we're recording this, you would say you're in later stages of dementia.
I'm approaching dementia. There aren't that many. There's enough symptoms that I definitely feel it in my mind, physically, socially, in many ways. But then dementia drops off where it's clearly obvious that a person has dementia. So I'm getting close to that drop-off point.
And you have a very different approach to it than most people I have met. And that is that you have made a choice. Well, why don't you describe to our listeners, because it's your journey, where you've come from, where you're at, and where you see yourself going?
Sure. It started in October of 2022. An incident happened where something that I should not have forgotten, I forgot. Completely black. So I went to my doctor and he sent me to the neurologist, and I got the first diagnosis of early stage dementia. So that's where it started. And when that happened, everything went black. Everything, I became non-functional because the words dementia and death were my world. Mm. And then something happened that really kept flowing through from the beginning. I only had the black, and then one day, for whatever reason, I only thought about dying. And one day I realized I'm living. I'm still living. I hadn't paid attention to that. So I'm dying from then, the ability for two things that I didn't think could work together, and they appeared. I didn't think of them. So there was living and dying. And then I realized living and dying are connected. The fact that I know I'm dying makes my living more immediate. And given that I'm living, I can make my dying more meaningful. Mm. So, wow, here's living and dying that I wouldn't have imagined would even connect. And they're it. So then I asked myself, what's my role in this whole thing? Mm. I'm feeling very much inside of me. There's my living part and my dying part. So I thought, well, the image I came up with was that living and dying are dancing a duet. And the phrase I use frequently is, when living and dying dance a duet, what music will you play? Pardon me, I get a little... I don't call it crying because crying has a certain, I've invented a lot of words. So I have something I call gut weep. Because I don't, it's not crying, it's this feeling. So that putting things together, entering what I call the surreal world is, that happened. So from the beginning, I can really trace things happen and happen. But that basis has carried along through the whole thing, that what I couldn't imagine being with dementia. I couldn't imagine that dying and living could be connected. And I couldn't imagine that I'm living and dying are dancing within me. And I have a role to play. I'm playing the music. And maybe the music is affecting their duet, or maybe the music is just affecting me and but that's the way it is. That was the beginning, and that's carried on for the whole thing.
There are many remarkable things about you and your story, but one of them is that when somebody gets a diagnosis, right, they believe it's in some ways the beginning of the end. But the way you've described it in our other conversations is it was sort of the beginning of what's next, a new chapter.
Yeah. And it is amazing in the sense I got the diagnosis came to me. I didn't go looking for it. And I can say I've been through quite a few steps, like the discovering that I'm dying, but I'm also living. Even what I've said up to now, they keep coming. I don't sit there and think, well, what's next? I don't think I've done that once in this whole process. The next step keeps coming along, and I flow with it. And not only do I flow with it, but again, in the insane world of dementia, I feel like my thinking less and feeling more, because that's what I do. I'm not capable of thinking too much anymore. And I'm finding flowing with that is not working for me very well. I actually, there's things about the way my life are now that I like better than it was before. I feel like, mind, what I call guts, thinking and feeling are now in a very different balance than what they were before. And I flow with it. So a lot of things are feelings. Anyway, to your question, it's not thinking or planning. It's feeling things and flowing with them and trusting them. And that's worked for me very well.
And not many people have ever described that I've sat with that have had dementia, have described it as the way you're describing it, which is a blessing, right? It's almost like, that say the word blessing in that context is almost like sacrilegious, right? And what I hear you saying, I've heard you say this, is the blessing of feeling outpacing the thinking has been a gift to you.
Yes, but number one, yes. I'm in places I wouldn't have imagined before. I'm big on words, so it's a blessing. I use the term golden moment because I really feel the release, and I like what I'm able to do now. I walk down the street, and instead of walking down, I've started paying attention to the trees. Walk along and look at the trees. It's a different world, and that I'm not looking at what's the name of this tree. Gosh, you look at the forms. Anyway, that part is definitely like a blessing, yeah. But I call it a golden moment because I know this is not going to last. This is temporary, and in some ways that makes it even more of a blessing, so to speak. But I would be careful with the downsides, and I'm moving into the stage where I will become non-functional. I shouldn't say that because I'm feeling that there's things person's mind has to be able to do in order to function, and I'm starting to feel that's in decline. That's when the whole blessing thing goes away. Yeah. And that's where it gets very rough. And
in only knowing you for the past month or so, we met at my book launch.
Yes.
You were gracious enough to be there. You're the first one.
Mazal tov, very fantastic. It's a delightful book. I read it, and so much of it spoke to me. So anyway, yeah.
And that's where we met, and you were just kind of showed up out of nowhere, and I'm so grateful that you did.
Me too.
But even since that time, I've noticed the way you've described your dementia as it's changing, and you're getting to a point where you feel like you're losing the ability to choose. And we've had some pretty raw and real conversations about what happens next. And I know that's something that, we should probably unpack a little bit.
I'll unpack for a bit, but you tell me when I've taken enough out. What happened was, at that first hit, and I thought dementia and death. So death came along, and in the most peculiar way, after I got over that initial shock, the two things happened. One is started seeing what you referred to as the blessings. Wait a second, I'm feeling more. There's a good side. And the other thing that happened was, instead of just being in shock about dementia and death, I started looking into it more. Mm-hmm. So I volunteered at a home for people. I joined groups. I joined support groups and whatever to learn more in the academic and everything that happened. And related to what you just asked, one of the things that happened was it became clear to me that no, I'm not going there. I'm not going to go to where dementia will take me. And that became clear. So even I got the first shock that said that, and then I wanted to look into it because life is precious. But the more I did that, I'm glad for what I have now. But no, I am going to chop it off before I get to there. And that's, of course, a very difficult thing because you never know when you're before. Mm-hmm. I'm going to have to end my life too early. That's the way this situation works. But having decided that at some point I'm going to end my life in this, I use the word surrealistic world of dementia, that's also been a relief. Mm-hmm. I don't worry about, who's going to take care of me? And pardon me for saying so, who's going to change my diapers? It's all these, who's going to feed me? Things I saw, that's what happens to people. So I think in a sense, that's made this process easier for me now because there's a whole range of worries and concerns that I don't have. The cost of it is I'm going to lose life. I'm going to lose, and I can't even know how much. When I end my life, that's going to be the end, and maybe I could have lived productively quite a few years. But I've made that determination. That's not going to happen.
Viktor Frankl talks about life is meaningful under all circumstances, and you have proven that the way you have described since your diagnosis until at least now, it has felt like, and you've described it as a very meaningful time for you. You've had so much purpose that, as you shared with me before, you didn't have prior to the diagnosis. And so I'd like to hear more about that, but I'd also like to be able to, have a brave conversation with you, and we can agree to disagree on why that wouldn't continue to be a source of inspiration and purpose in all circumstances.
Without a doubt, exactly what you said. I call it awareness and conversation. Any opportunity I have to raise awareness and conversation about dementia, that's in a nutshell. And so you're helping me have meaning in my life now, because if I was sitting at home now looking out the window or whatever, it wouldn't be the same. This is what keeps me alive. I think literally, because I think my disintegration, and I'm definitely feeling my disintegration, would go faster and be harsher and have a bigger effect on me if I didn't have this mission. And again, it's insane, so to speak. My dementia is what's giving me my mission that's keeping me alive. So I don't think about that. That's okay, I accept that, and that's the way life is. But yes, not only is that exactly right, that it's my mission, I do get the feedback on that. I've had the opportunity to speak at quite a few places in the Denver area. And I know just when I'm talking, watching the people and getting questions, people want to hear this stuff. People want to hear somebody who's there talking openly about it. And so that I'm in a position to do that. I wouldn't say thankfully, because I'd be happy to not do this whole thing at all. But there is value to it. And I see it. After talks, people have invited me over to their house. Said, could you come over? We want to have a conversation. Gosh, if I'm giving people just by expressing what I'm doing, yeah, that's a mission. That's me fulfilling a mission or working on a mission. And I can't even say how important that is for me. It's this crazy mission of talking. It's unimaginable, actually. I talk about death and dementia, but that's where I'm at. So I do it. And yes, it very much is the mission that I'm on. And it's very much affecting even my functionality. Think of it. If I didn't have this mission, I'd just fall apart.
And, that's where it's so hard to bear witness to what you're suggesting and where you're heading, because you have so much life force, you have so much, joy, and it's hard to just name it, but just ruach, energy. And it feels to me like that's such a gift in any stage and in any form, and that would continue to be true for however long you were here, dying of natural causes when that came. But that's not how you see it.
No, it's not how I see it. Again, when living and dying dance a duet with music while I play. When dying became here, somebody can explain it to me sometime. When dying entered my life so much, that's when my living really took off in a certain new direction, in a certain new way. And so that's why, because my dying, things are going wrong with me, and I'm feeling them more and more. And yes, that's making me live more and more. But I wouldn't have this energy if it wasn't for dying. If I could have this solution that says, wow, I can make a drug out of it and say, wow, I'm going to keep having this energy and this interest. And in some ways, my creativity has gone up quite a bit, and people have commented on it that they didn't know I could do such things. But that's all comes from dying. That's all. Certainly, dying is unlocking a lot of things I feel that would have stayed hidden or locked up or something. So I'm really interested in what you said, but wow, why not? This is my golden moment, so make it a golden hour, make it a golden week. No, I connected to the fact that I'm dying. I don't know how to do it otherwise.
One of the, I think, sources of inspiration that I've drawn from you, and I think our listeners will agree, is, death is rarely approached in this manner of what an opportunity to live. Right? You're dancing your duet. And we live in a society that really doesn't do well with death at all. It's one of the last taboos in our society. Like, you just don't talk about it. And so the fact that you're shining light into it, we're all sentenced to death, but yours is accelerated. And so you have this unique window, this unique ability to see into it and share it with others. And I know I've really started to think about some of these darker things in a different way, just being in your presence.
I'd be curious to hear about that, because that really relates to what you said. How can it be communicated so you're absorbing, and you are absorbing some of the idea? Well, death, dying, maybe it's just not this black thing, but maybe we can relate to dying and to death in a different way. And that's what I heard you just say you're doing. You're able to say, let me take some of the dying things and put them productively into my life, which I absolutely.
Yeah. And use it. Use your death, right? That's all the great mystics, all the great philosophies say, keep that in your back pocket. Find ways, the Buddhist tradition has ways to meditate on corpses. I know the same is true in the Jewish Hasidic tradition, where you would meditate on like a dying fish that's hanging and kind of watching it decompose as a way. It sounds morbid, but the fact is it helps remind us of how precious life is, how finite it is, and to maximize it. And the way you've described your diagnosis onwards, it feels like a maximized life, right?
Yeah. For me, it is, absolutely. My life is much more fuller, I would say. Yes, because of this situation.
Tell us about pre-diagnosis, that chapter, those chapters of your life. You said it was much more in your head. It was a much different version of Wally that was showing up.
For sure. I was, for a profession, I was a management consultant in the area of organization and operations. So that's very much make sure everything is laid out nicely and written properly and people are obeying the rules and stuff like that. And that was very natural for me. After I got my MBA, it was natural for me to go into a big consulting firm and do that kind of stuff. And it was very comfortable for me, and married and kids and all the usual stuff. So life was very comfortable in that way, going along according to a pattern that was, quite normal and very okay. This is what life's about, and go on vacation sometimes and stuff like that. So all of the things where I'm at now, I don't think they existed even in the way. It's a very standard life and a nice life and stuff like that.
Was it fulfilling?
I would say it would, as long as I didn't have any questions or even have something that says, to ask a question. Well, if there's no questions, then it's as fulfilling as I'm able to feel fulfilled. And in that sense, yes. And it was also fulfilling in the sense that other activities where there were, things missing, folk dancing, for example, or different kinds of things like that, things I wanted also part of my life. So those came along, and that's fine. And life can work that way just fine from beginning to end. That's where I was at.
We've talked before about this idea of shattering. It comes from the Kabbalistic traditions called the Shvirat Kelim. And it's a coming undone to birth something new, right? If you think about the womb, every birth is a shattering. The universe, the Big Bang, is a shattering. And life has moments of shatterings. And you can either look at it, again, as an end or as a rebirth of sorts. And I've seen I've heard in the way you've described your shatter as a shattering. And it doesn't look the same when you piece it back together, right? And you've used the idea of kintsugi of the Japanese art. Maybe you talk a little bit about that. How does it resonate with you?
Well, yeah, that image is quite strong. Like you reach a point in shattering, there's no recognizable, you're not looking in a mirror and it's got a crack in it or something, but you can still see what it's all about. And I think, here, you know what, now that you say that, there's different ways of relating to dementia. And one is, there's, I think, the word denial. And so the person goes through and doesn't accept it and stuff like that. And in a sense, that's much harder because there is a reality, but we're not, a person maybe doesn't keep up with that reality or accept that reality. So they're halfway in, and I would be halfway in the life that I lived up to then, and halfway in a world of I'm forgetful and getting old and stuff like that. But what happened with me exactly was shattering. When that incident occurred, hey, something is really wrong here. Mm. And in that sense, shattering, it was a shock. As I said before, wow, I couldn't think of anything. I didn't know what was going on. But being able to come out of the shattering, yeah, that made a big difference. And the willingness to flow with that. And I could be luck, or to be honest, before I got the diagnosis, I had an interest in Nikola Tesla. And I actually have a website called It's a Resonating World.
You have a lot of websites.
I learned how to build web pages. No web designer would accept me as none of them are designed, but I sort of that's how I collect things, whatever. And so I had this interest in flow and energies. And so that played, I think, into how things, after the shattering, I felt things in terms of flow and energy. It wasn't like broken, okay? What in a way, then it's almost like a management consultant. What's the flow look like? What's the work procedure? Not looking at things as things standing there, but rather just relating to everything as flow. So I think that may have been another advantage I had, was I had that background that said, okay, I've been diagnosed with dementia. I don't want to be, I won't even say the words, but let's say I didn't take that to be the absolute end, because I have a way of thinking in terms of feeling, in terms of flowing. I think that did come into play to help me get out of that shattering.
And, the shattering is only suffering if you try to rebuild that mirror, because you can't do it. But if it's something else, right? And that's what I heard you say, is that energy, it's repurposing the energy. The energy's still there, right? We're not going to try and recreate what was. We're going to flow into what is.
Wow. What you just said, I makes a difference in a lot of places, in a lot of ways.
And so your energy is flowing in a different way than it ever has in your life, in a different direction you never intended, but here we are. Where does that energy go upon physical death? What are your thoughts on this?
Okay, one of the limitations I have is I can't jump easily. So you said something a moment ago. I'd like to follow up on that. Just about, there's something I've been doing lately. An epitaph, let's say an epitaph is chiseled into stone or something like that. So it's exactly in stone. It doesn't go anywhere. So part of the flow is, I call it epitaphing. It's what somebody liked, what would be on their epitaphing, to remember them, to grieve for them or remember them. I'm gonna do in some way something I know that they like to do. So I call it epitaphing. It makes a flow out of this person like this. Well, then I'm gonna do it, and that's how I'm gonna remember him. And that's how his energies are going to keep going. And in a certain sense, an energy sense, it's keeping that person alive because something that person valued is still in action. So I call that epitaphing, and it really fits in. And I've found epitaphing, I'm glad to do it in a lot of cases. It's one thing. Sorry, anyway, I wanted to say that about flow.
No, please, let's keep going with this. So epitaphing, give me more examples of how you've epitaphed.
Okay, for sure. Epitaphing works two different ways. One is if I want to remember somebody passed away or whatever it is, so then I can try to recollect or feel or remember what did that person value that I, out of respect and remembering that person, I want to pick that thing up, and it's not the same thing or anything like that, but I want to do it to keep his memory alive or to something like that. And for example, an example of that is my late brother, who was a gardener. And gosh, he really was into gardening and stuff like that. So to remember him, what I felt I would do is when I'm walking along and I see a plant or a flower that really strikes me, that I think is striking, I'll go over and stroke it a little bit, touch it a little bit. And that's my act of remembering him. And so that's what I consider epitaphing. It's not, oh, my brother was a nice guy gardener. It says, I'm going to do something. I'm going to flow and the energies and stuff like that. So one side of epitaphing means I'm going to bring somebody else's energies. Mm-hmm. And then from the other side, as a person who's dying with my dementia, I can do epitaphing going out. If there's energies things I really like. And
like recording this conversation, I see you're epitaphing for so many people.
Well, I am, or more specific from me. I have told, you know what? It is. I've started intentionally adding into things I say, things that express I like. What I'm about, exactly what you just said, actually. And for me, when I do it, I recognize it as epitaph. I'm putting energies out there that, I don't ask somebody, could you please remember that? Or I'm putting the energies out there of what energies I want out in the world, and I put them out there, and the world knows how to do with them exactly what it wants to do. But I do the epitaphing in a sense of paying attention to putting my energies out in a way that I feel the person can, they're just hearing a story. They're not hearing me putting my energies out or something like that.
It says in Proverbs, Ner Hashem Nishmat Adam, the Ner Hashem, that the light of God is the soul of a man. And the Kabbalist likened it to a candle with the flame on top. Oh, wow. And the candle melts, burns down. And that's a person's physical life. It all eventually is returned to the earth. But the flame, right, the soul, the flame, can be passed from candle to candle.
Wow.
Right? And you can keep that flame going in perpetuity if you pass it.
Beautiful.
And I feel like, but that's what, we're doing here. You've been doing in this epitaphing chapter of your life, and that people hearing this are receiving the flame, the energy, right? I mean, just carrying it out forward. And I do believe that's how we defy death.
Those last few words, can you talk about it? That's
teacher of mine said, when I'm doing funerals back in the day, keep this in mind. A person dies 2 deaths. Once when their body dies and there's nothing we can do about it. You can prolong it, but it's going to take us. But the second death is when their story dies. right? When their story dies is a second death. And I can become a guardian of the story.
I'm curious. I'll take what you just said and a story dies. A story isn't actually connected to a person. A story is life, is the world. I could get pretty excited about that. When their story dies. Now, but the story can keep going long after the person isn't remembered at all. And I think accepting that is part of what you do. Okay, I don't need my name to be remembered. I'm here to put energies out into the world. And the energies will do whatever they want, and my name isn't going to last, And I think, how many generations back do I remember, even know? It's even written down. My relative, my great grand, don't know them at all. But I feel like their stories are passed down. It influenced my grandparents, my parents, some of those. So what you just said, their story, keeping their story alive, I think is a beautiful way of flowing, deciding what should continue, what energies are good to continue, which is what they did, what they were about, what they valued, and not their name and individual details or something like that.
Yeah, that's all laid to rest. But the energy, right? It's physics, right? It's not, energy isn't created or destroyed. It changes forms. And I do feel like this is epitaphing, right? You're generating energy. It goes out, it's received, it's carried forward. Your brother and you touching the tree, right? The very fact that that's happening, there's energy moving, and yeah.
Beautiful. You're expressing it very nice. And I love the flame. Flame is a good image to say, okay, it's you can't put a flame in a box and wrap it up or something like that.
And you just keeps going as long as we, cultivate the energy. But is that how you approach death, the soul, or whatever you want to call it? Or do you believe? What do you believe?
I'll just say, first off, it's different to be a little far away from death than it is to get close to death. I'm scared, to be honest. I have all these ideas, but getting close to death, it's not easy. I'm struggling with it a bit. But what I believe is, and because I believe it so much, I feel like it's helping me out. I believe everything is energies. It's a resonating world. Before my website was called It's a Resonating World, which is about energies. It was everything is energies. So I'm there. Everything is energies. It's anything you feel like is a thing. I don't think, and I feel that really is helping me in how I relate to death. It's okay. This physical body, the energies are going to be released, and then they'll go do other things. That's what I want my ashes spread under a certain set of olive trees outside of Jerusalem, because I always used to run by those olive trees and high-five them, and I'll be happy. The energies of them, I don't want me buried there or anything like that, but as part of the energies flow and how they're going to keep growing, and somebody else is going to look at them one day and be, wow, or pick olives from them or whatever. That's how we see death. It's all a flow. It's all okay. Now here you keep getting me thinking, and actually, yes, I'll think about this for quite a while. Thinking of it this way, it's a real flow of what has happened before, and I'm just fitting into that flow. until my energies become something else, and that's fine.
And I think it's important for people to hear a real dance that you're doing. We can know something in theory and have these great understandings of the world and death and soul, but when you approach it, as we all are, but you're on an accelerated path, it's still easy and understandable to slip into doubt and fear.
Sure. That's really where
It's not linear.
It's not, I hadn't realized that because I had gotten a little bit used to, after I got the dementia and got over the initial shock. Well, it was far enough away that I didn't really relate to death and dying. And I'm not even sure, I'm not sure it's death and dying. It's more, disconnecting from things I'm used to being connected with, and it's not really dying or what's going to happen next. I actually, now that I know what I want to have happen. I know I want to end up being in whatever form in that olive grove. And so it's not, dying isn't the hard part about it. It's really the connection and the idea. I know it's a resonating world and I believe it, but resonating is like a form of connection. And I guess I'm not absorbing the resonating part as much as I could, because I'm sorry to be leaving. Not just sorry. I get pretty upset about the idea of, it's going to have an impact on some people, etc. So that's still pretty difficult.
Yeah, for me, I feel the same way, have some of the same beliefs. And then I have these moments of like 3 a.m, like the realization of what it means. And there's these moments, it's just all the faith in the world stops me in my tracks. And for me, it's even less of fear of dying or death, but of just not being here. Like, that's a hard thing to really wrap your head around. And I think it's just really honest. And I think it's good for people to see a man who's in faith and knowing, and also who has real human doubts and struggles, because that's part of the deal.
So how do you relate to dying, and what it means to die, and what happens after whatever happens?
Yeah, no, I believe, Kabbalah says we don't have a soul, we have souls, right? Layers of soul, right? The lowest layer is nefesh, and it's bodily soul. And that stuff returns to the ground and, becomes flowers, and the lamb eats the flowers and the lion eats the lamb, and it's the circle of life kind of energy here, and then there's another layer up, and that's, ruach, that's emotional, that's distinct personality kind of identity stuff. And that some stays here and to our children, like, right, you're just interwoven. You have 4 kids.
Yes.
You're interwoven into their essence. And some of that goes with you and some of that stays here. And then there's another layer up, and that's more into the ethereal. That's the untouchable by death, right? Neshama. That's just breath of life. And so when I start to look at it that way, that makes sense to me. I'm just not a binary thinker. Body, soul, death, life. And you've really described that in your dance, the duet. They're intertwined. And so I don't really like anything that fits well on a bumper sticker. And I don't think that explanation fits well on a bumper sticker.
So those 3 things you just described are like all part of what we're about. The nefesh and the ruach and the neshama are all different ways of relating to ourselves, and the different ways we connect with other people. Gosh, that's a heck of a flow. And that's Kabbalistic, the Kabbalists.
Yeah, they describe 4 layers. There's one more, but that's sort of beyond even understanding. But so really kind of hang out in these 3 levels and layers. And I think about lots of time, like, just at a physical nefesh spirituality kind of interconnected. And that part's, that's sad to me. I like being embodied. right?
We're kind of used to it, I guess you could say, something like that. And okay, but that's the balance, and we do the best we can. And hearing what you say, which really helps me with what I'm feeling, I'm glad to have that as the basis that I'm standing on, and not black and white, just what you said. There are these levels, like the neshama. Okay, that's
transcendent. That's forever. That's your loved ones reuniting in Olam Haba, and the next reality, and that's something else. And I think about that. I'm like, no. But the nefesh, the bodily, the interaction with my wife and my kids, and eating and celebrating, and all the simchas and all the stuff down here, like I mourn that already. Like when I stop and think about that, that's sad, and that's okay.
You mourn it. You mourn even though the neshama is floating around, and that other level you mentioned is forever. But yeah, that's what. So that you're saying, okay, you recognize those levels, and you accept that this level is we can be sad about it without a problem.
Yeah, and I feel like that epitaphing is in that sort of middle ground there, the ruach, what was distinctly Wally. There never was, is, or never, or ever will be another Wally here, and some of that gets imparted, and some of it dissipates.
Yeah, and that okay. The way you did it, let's do that. That's fine. And yeah.
So what do you say to, so this is a very enlightened approach to dementia. That's not the world that most people occupy. You get the diagnosis, not just dementia, but most diagnoses. I did so many funerals when I was a rabbi of successful people who did not talk about death. They did not prepare for death. They did not communicate their ethical or medical or actual, legal wills and wants to people. You've really defied that. You're out there publicly talking about it. I know you have a lecture coming up in a couple of days.
Yeah.
Right? Like what's driving you to do that?
What's driving me to do that is because that's my mission now. And if I didn't do that, I would be maybe already gone, without a doubt. That's, as you had mentioned before, I think you quoted Viktor Frankl saying, person with a mission can, and this is my mission, so I'm.
Why is it your mission?
I wouldn't have any idea why.
What do you hope that you have all these websites, you have all these Wallyisms, you have this podcast, you're going doing a lecture. What is your hope?
You know what? Maybe it's related to epitaph. I didn't think of that way. Yeah, I'm bringing those energies to the world. That's, it's the phrase I use: awareness and conversation. That's what I'm bringing to the world, is raising awareness and conversation about dementia. And I guess anybody can feel their own energies and want to bring those energies to the world, because that's what they're about. So that's what they have to bring to the world. And it's like my brother was a gardener. And that's what he loved. That was the energies that's what the energies he brought to the world. And the world benefited by it, and the world interacted, resonated with it. So how does a person discover what their own, okay, well, one thing that has happened to me, and I felt it with the dementia, is there's something I call noise. There's a lot of noise in the world. And because of my dementia, I literally I can't take in too much into my mind. I just can't, and I get overwhelmed very easily. But that's really helped me with the idea of noise. I have to identify and prevent from getting in anything that's not of value to me, that doesn't mean something to me. And I call all that noise. So I think that's part of it, is people who aren't as sensitive. People are pretty normal and take in the noise and let the noise do it. I think that makes it very difficult to identify my authentic self. I think I would be busy with things that I was busy with up until the diagnosis. So I think that has a lot to do with it. I think finding my authentic self did help. Okay, that I feel okay now. I was something else before, but now, yeah, this is who I am, what I'm about. This is what I'm bringing to the world.
So you feel like the dementia and everything that's happened since is really revealing the authentic Wally?
I think it's taking away the noise, which is allowing me to feel what my authentic is. And at one point, my guts told me to create my tombstone, which didn't make any sense to me because I'm not going to be buried. What do I need a tombstone for? So I didn't do it. And the next day, my guts told me again. That's the last time my guts had to ask twice. So it took me several weeks to strip off the noise and all that kind of stuff. And I came up with what I feel is the statement of what I'm about. And the statement is, it's 20 words long. I don't know if I'll remember it exactly right now. But it is to feel situations I'm in and bring my energies to make the situation richer for everybody that it touches. That's as authentic from my guts. That's what I'm about. Okay, so that was my tombstone. But immediately I said, well, wait a second. I'm living. It's really my life stone. So it's actually after it took several weeks to figure that out. But once I figured it, and then I turned it into my life stone, it's like a beacon for me. So I use that to feel myself in all kinds. It's guiding how I'm living my life now, and. But that had to go through a lot of stripping away of, am I a Cubs fan or I don't know what, whatever it is. But just stripping it away to feeling what I feel, and everybody would be completely different. But I think, the getting rid of the noise is a start to figuring out what a person is really about, for sure.
Can somebody get rid of the noise without the shattering? Could Wally 1.0 have gotten to there? Or does the shattering...
Well, those are two completely different questions. One is, you said, can a person? Well, that's far beyond me. Wally, I'm pretty clear to myself, if I hadn't gone through the shattering, I would not have gotten to this place. I probably wouldn't have even dealt with this whole topic. And so that's what I say to myself. Gosh, it took dementia to get me to the place. This is where I should be. There isn't a should, but to get to this place, I had to have dementia. I don't think I would have. And as you used the word shattering, it needed some real shattering from.
I ask men all the time, what's your why? Viktor Frankl says that there is no why, there's no meaning of life. There's Wally's meaning of life. There's Baruch's meaning of life. There's Yehuda's meaning of life. And each of ours it's as unique to us as our fingerprint. Right? And I have asked so many men, what's your why? And to date, I have not had somebody answer it as succinctly and eloquently, as authentically as you just did.
Well, let me ask you about that. Now that you're framing things this way, Viktor Frankl went through a shattering. I mean, he may have been, I don't know what he was like before, heaven forbid, the Holocaust, but did that affect, did he have a shattering and came out of the Holocaust with feelings and understandings that he hadn't had before?
I, can't speak for him, but as much as I know about him, I mean, his wife was murdered, his unborn child was murdered, the whole, the Holocaust story, everything he had lost, everything he had taken from him. But, he said, but the last of human freedoms to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And that was, everything was stripped away from him except that, the power to choose his response to his circumstances. And so that's a very similar description of what you're talking about, right? To be shattered and to be revealed. There's a saying that I love: circumstances don't make a man, they reveal him.
Oh, wait a second. Say that again.
Circumstances don't make a man, they reveal him. And that's what I'm feeling in being in your presence, as a revealed man.
Well, that's really something, because we're all in all kinds of circumstances, and they may not be as, I don't know what the right word is, as the Holocaust or dementia. We're all in all kinds of circumstances every day when things happen. Yeah. So if we can use circumstances as a way, everything that happens, you see something that's upsets you or something like that, or you can create the circumstances. But all I'm saying is, maybe there's a lot more things that we can relate to that will help us get to this, explore ourselves, than what we even pay attention to.
Somebody once said, you can tell a child not to touch a hot stove 100 times if it's off, or you can tell them once if it's on.
There you go.
Right? And I feel like, yes, you can get there when the stove isn't hot. It takes a lot of work, a lot of commitment, a lot of intention, and people do it. I meet people who do it. But most of us tend to need a hot stove. I wish it weren't that way. But when you do touch the hot stove, when you do go through the dementia, when you do go through the divorce, the financial devastation, right? Who's underneath there? And so, yes, I think you can get there, in a less painful way. But the question is when painful happens, do we at least go into it like you have?
Okay. Painful. Okay. And do we get into it? I think there are people who do recognize, when the stove is warm and not hot, or when you turn on the shower and you get in, it doesn't have to be burning hot, but they'll realize, you know what? I need to do this before I step into the shower to check. So even not hot stoves will get the job done, without a doubt. But I think what I'm feeling you're saying is offering an opportunity to say, gosh, there's a lot of situations come up that we think of as, wow, that's uncomfortable, or that hurts. But no, from what I hear you saying is there's a lot behind that can start being a way of relating, of singing a different song with that unpleasant thing that happens, or that thing that made me angry, or something like that.
My experience has been too that, it's all a curriculum. Right? We're here to learn. And this is your curriculum. Wally's curriculum is different than Baruch's curriculum. And the tests just keep repeating, and, I can keep failing it because I keep going about it the same way. Or I can study, I can approach it differently, I can pass this test, and they stop coming somehow, right? The patterns stop coming, and the lessons evolve, are bigger. I think it was Wayne Dyer said he had a prayer. God, all I ask that you bless me with bigger problems.
Wow.
Right?
Wow. Okay. And he was able to say that because he felt the value of the problems, and that's the way he related to them. He didn't think of them as problems that need to be fixed or something like that. And yes, and so we can do that. Now, I can't help but go back to Rabbi Moshe Hauer and that response he had when I said, Zichrono Livracha, I said, there's something really wrong here. And his response was, thank you for pointing out that problem with our organization.
Because you approached him to teach about dementia or talk
That's
about
right.
it.
That's exactly right. That's I wasn't getting any response. And so that was, he didn't take my being a problem as a problem. Mm-hmm. His response was literally, thank you for pointing out that situation in our organization. Now we'll take care of it. And he did. And so that's, some schmuck from wherever coming along and complaining. But he took it exactly the way you're talking about it. Let's use that as a way to see how we can be better who we want to be.
Yeah, that's a certain worldview that says I'm going to take responsibility for everything that happens to me, and that's a tall order.
It's a tall order, yeah. But it's a really tall. It's maybe impossible, but that doesn't mean we drop out of the approach altogether. And sometimes that's not easy to remember when whatever.
And sometimes you got to repeat a grade.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it can be really tough sometimes.
Yeah, you flunk, okay. But there's next year's curriculum. There's next year's opportunity or next.
It's always there, even though, it's the fact that sometimes there are ones we can't even get over doesn't mean that we shouldn't use this approach when they're in my experience. Yeah, there's stuff that it's not easy to get over at all, but.
So let's briefly talk about, or not briefly, people who are tending to loved ones, because my demographic tends to be 40 to 60, somewhere in that kind of space. And of course, dementia can come at most any age or up at a certain age. But most of the people that probably are listening to this are in the caretaking role, taking care of elderly parents or loved ones. What do they need to hear from somebody who's so bravely facing it?
I feel that the caregiver role is much harder than the patient role. It's really... caregiver, dementia destroys. In my mind, dementia destroys the person who has dementia, but dementia destroys the people around in all kinds of ways. There's so many people who give up, caregivers who give up their own lives in order to take care of that person and reach the end. They say, I can't do anymore. The patient is waking up every 2 hours and this, I don't, they know better than I do all the horrible, horrible, horrible things they go through. And that's, so asking about the caregivers is a different situation than asking about the patient. And I also read, the advice that they're often given. Make sure to take time for yourself and make sure this and make sure. That's part of the horror of dementia. There isn't enough. There isn't enough time. Somebody has to be with the person with dementia, period. And it goes beyond what a person is capable of doing physically and emotionally and all that kind of stuff.
I think just hearing that's valuable, right? Knowing that no human being is capable of everything.
No, they're not. I am familiar with that, and it is beyond doable, without a doubt. And I'm not. I don't know. I can say I don't want to be too certain about it, but we don't have the tools now that are needed for this to take care of this. So it falls on individuals, and they're put in horrible circumstances. And though they pay the price, so to speak, now and for a long time, they stop being with their friends. They leave studies. Some even leave. In one of the sessions, the woman said, well, she left her job to take care of her husband. In 4 years, they'll be out in the street. And by any thinking, well, that's not possible. You can't do that. But what are you going to do? In 10 minutes, your loved one is going to start banging on the door and trying to get outside, and that'll be a disaster if the loved one can get outside and stuff like that. So the mind can say a lot of things, but it's not really what's happening here. It's the person that you're closest to or are very close to that's just in this horrible puts the care giver into a horrible situation. I have not seen, for many people, just what to do about that. There is the advice that's always given: make sure to take care of yourself. And that's true to the degree to which a person can. But there's a lot of situations where the person just can't, without damaging the person who's not able to take care of themselves. Okay, let me go back to there's nothing I can do about that. What I can do something about is, those of us, what I feel is really lacking is, let's raise this topic with early stage dementia people, or with the public in general. Let's put this on the table, not with any advocating any position whatsoever, but let's raise this as a conversation, so that when a person is diagnosed with dementia and goes through the shock and whatever, part of what's going to happen as it's going along, let's have the conversation. Let's
about end of life choices.
What choices about how to proceed? What is going to, could be end of life choices, or could be, okay, I'm going to continue, and this is, how I'm going to get by, or the level of home that I'm going to go to, and like that. Let's do those up front, because if we don't talk about those things, it's going to go and be the worst. Because the person with dementia won't even be part of the conversation anymore, and the other people have to take care of even more. So, raising the conversation as a matter of normal, not as a matter of, well, if I remember it or something like that. That's what I think we can do a lot about.
That's absolutely true. Let me run this by you. My stepfather was dying a few years back, and he had dementia. And my mom was really struggling, because what he wanted in the moment wasn't what he had wanted in moments prior, or a year prior. And one of the things I've told her, and I've told a lot of people I've counseled, is because she started to feel like he was attacking her and she was betraying him by not giving what he wanted in the moment. But what we talked about was, as his wife, she had a duty to honor her husband, and the husband that he was, to make sure that a year prior, that man's will was listened to and heeded, not this husband's will.
Wow.
And so that really she was protecting him from his self and honoring the husband, the man that Howard was. And that helped her reframe it. It was really no longer about her. It was about her being a steward of what she knew he had wanted, because they had the conversations, is the point.
Wow.
But you can only do that if you have the conversation.
Right. Although that is really powerful what you just said, because that gives the caregiver another thing to legitimately relate to, because it's quite literally can make them crazy to try to satisfy every minute. And when the person with dementia demands all kinds, starts screaming, and when am I going to see my husband again, even though he's dead for 20 years? You're providing another framework for the caregiver to think, okay, I'm gonna honor the way you were, the way the person was before.
Because that's what we talked about also. That, like, he communicated to her his will when he was cognizant and conscious, and she became a steward of it.
That's really beautiful. It gives her, wow, what a beautiful feeling. I'm being a steward of what we agreed to, and you've changed, but I'm honoring and respecting and loving who you were.
The true you,
the true you before this horrible thing happened. That's really beautiful.
And the other thing is when I'm counseling people who are tending to loved ones and dealing with dementia, is we got to come back to values. Values are immutable. Circumstances change. But like, what was Howard's value? So for instance, my stepfather was a very frugal man. But he wanted to take heroic measures to get him out of the Alzheimer's unit or whatever, the unit he was in. And it was just get him home again. And they were going to have to retrofit his house. And it was going to be exorbitant amount of money. And she felt bad because this version of him said, at all costs, get me home. That is not the man who stood on values of being conservative with the money, making sure it's being prudent and spent on worthy causes. I'm 100% certain that man would never have signed off on this. And I said, that's who you answer to. This one is dealing in circumstances. This man was dealing in values. And I think that that's a big shift for people.
It's a big shift in approach. And I wonder, just off the top of the moment, what it would be like, what was it like for her as she was connecting with the way he was, but having to deal with this demanding person who is doing horrible things. She has
and saying horrible things, right?
And
how can my wife betray me like this?
That's right. That's exactly. Even with that specific situation, you're not paying any attention to me. Why are you treating me so badly?
And that's when I think, the nefesh, the ruach, is kind of leaving, right? And it's physically looks like him, but there's less and less of him. And so we have to answer to the true Howard, right? To his neshama, that immutable piece of him that will never change. And you asked me what it was like for her. I think it was liberating that she was now, again, you keep coming at the word steward, right? That she was responsible to her commitment, her vow to that man who stood in values and communicated values. And when the circumstances changed, sorry, but the values don't.
Wow, given the way you're just saying it, is like we were talking about epitaphing before. She's keeping alive who he was, the beautiful, wonderful, and there's no room for speculating, but it's possible to say that's exactly what he would have wanted her to do. Keep me alive the way you can this way. But that, as you say, that's a conversation beforehand, so she can have the confidence that this is what he would want.
And now it's not betrayal. It may be betrayal to this version, but it's devotion to this truer version.
Wow. I have seen the other way. There was a woman in one of the sessions. She said her husband swore he was going to end his own life while he still could, before he became non-functional, and he missed it. And she said 11 years she spent being his caregiver, and she knew every day he didn't want it and she didn't want it. But because she got caught in the trap, so to speak. And so she didn't have the kind of thing that you're talking about. And it was just misery. But again, and I suppose a caregiver could do it on their own, in the sense of saying, well, I know who he was, and I'm going to relate to him or her the way they were before. I think I'm sort of trying to figure out, it's still possible even without having had that conversation.
It is, but it's like anything in life, the more communication you can have, the more consciousness you can have, because all we have at the end of the day is our choice, right? Until we don't have our choice.
Right.
And I know that that's something you're deeply grappling with. And at what point do you cross into that place where it's no longer my choice? And whatever I decide for myself, I want to communicate it. This is why it's so important to have medical directives, legal directives, ethical directives, right? And most people just don't approach these things proactively. Maybe they will now after this conversation.
But that's we're putting energies out there, and if those energies they'll do as much good as they're supposed to do, or we're offering those energies the way to make. But those are all parts of here, and also all parts of the flow, to make those preparations and have those conversations and stuff like that. But we don't have many things that advance the idea of have these conversations. These are tough conversations to have.
Yeah, and I just want to acknowledge that it's quote unquote easy for me to sit here and drum it up, and it's courageous for you to sit here and participate.
You know what? I just say, people say brave. It's not brave. It's the choice is either we're going to have this conversation or I'm going to go rot somewhere. And so it's not brave at all. Those are my two choices. And this is giving me a mission. And a person, just what you said before, everything you said before so beautifully. A person doesn't have a mission, they're going to rot. So I don't consider it brave at all. I consider it what keeps me alive.
Well, we can agree to disagree. I think it's brave. Actually, I like the word courageous better, because it was taught to me that courage comes from the Latin word cor, which means heart. So it's very heartening.
Okay, but thank goodness in the society there are here, like what you're saying, what you're doing, and Viktor Frankl doing what he did, and that whole thing is resonating also, and that is available to person. You know what? For people who want to tune in to those energies that are out there, they're out there for sure.
And, as we start to wrap it up, I'll just say that how important it is for people listening to hear that you can discover your why, your meaning, your purpose in any life circumstance and at any age. You described to me earlier that in some ways you discovered your true purpose only after the diagnosis. And most people would never have put that together. They think that that's maybe when a life purpose ends. And you really flipped the script on this conversation.
I'll flow with what you said. I don't know when people realize things. There may be different circumstances, but without a doubt, that's exactly what happened to me. A lot of what you called a blessing before. You know, I feel, gosh, it's forbidden for me to say this, but yeah, there have definitely been good things that have come out of me being with dementia.
Frankel has a term called transforming tragedy into triumph.
Wow.
And if we don't find blessings in the darkness, then they're just tragedy. You know, my father, I've had so many blessings come after his suicide. I would trade it all in to have him back, but nobody's ever made me that offer. So either it's meaningless or I go into it and discover the meaning. And then that's how you transform tragedy into triumph. Otherwise, it's tragedy.
And for you, it's a special tragedy. I mean, the circumstances where that whole thing happened, that you could use that easily. Could have used that as an excuse to say, I'm done. I can't recover from this terrible shock that I've just been through and stuff like that. But you didn't. You've brought this whole thing about. That's how you have related to it, to the black that happened.
And I want to acknowledge what you described. It hasn't been linear. It's been up and down and up and down. You know, you look at a friend of mine's a stockbroker, and he said, because I call him when the stock's down, and he says, zoom out. I'm like, what do you mean zoom out? He sends me a graph of the stock market over the past 100 years. It's a 45-degree angle upward.
Uh-huh.
But if you zoom in daily, it looks like a heart rate, you know, bouncing back and forth. And so for me, it's been an upward trajectory, but there have been some dark nights of the soul. And I know that you have and are going through some of those too. And that's okay.
I appreciate your saying that, because it could get lost in this conversation. When I got here today, I wasn't feeling anything like having a conversation has done for me. Yeah, there are some really, probably the last couple of days have been really difficult. Really, yeah, there are the downs, and that comes along with it. And those are serious downs, you know.
Well, the courage to go into the darkness, into the down, and to, you know, mine it for meaning, look for it down here, is, you know, shared now with others who are going to hear this and witness it. And they're going to, I believe, have a new way to look at some very old issues that go unattended, unaddressed, and they start to dominate us and they start to overwhelm us. We shut down. We hear the diagnosis as the end, and you have embodied, more importantly than talk about, the example of it doesn't have to be the end. It can be the beginning of something else.
But let's say, if you don't mind, sometimes when you're in the moment, it's tough. I have called 988. Sometimes you need help. You need help now. And so, thank goodness, 988 is available. I've had very good experience with them. And I just want to mention it because sometimes you don't have the luxury of zooming out. Sometimes life can be really, really difficult.
And, you know, life is worth living. And you are an example of that, to be able to have this why, to share it with so many people. Tell the listeners where all the 67 websites they can find you on.
No, I'll tell you, you know, just the phrase life is worth living. Oh, that's actually the end of a song I like a lot. It says, and life is worth living, but only worth living when you're born free, or you're living free. Life can be worth living as long as, you can do the kinds of things that we've been talking about to make it worth living. It ties into what you exactly said. There are things we can do to turn around what seems to be the blackness and find the good things. Yes.
Well, your life has made a permanent imprint on mine. And I am glad that you have continued to choose life. And for as long as you choose it, I am grateful. And whatever comes down the road, just know that your epitaphing has impacted me in ways you have no idea.
I appreciate you saying that. You can see the results of what you're doing out in the world, and it's beautiful. See, that's the light, is having your energies be out there, and we can hear you, we can see you, we can read your books, and make things better in that way.
And whenever we go to the other world, what's ever beyond this one, I believe we can hear you and see you and feel you, and energy doesn't die, it changes forms.
Will resonate, will continue to resonate, and that's a beautiful thing.
And I'm going to Beit Zait in Jerusalem and going to go tap on some olive trees down the road and
say hi to them.
You've given me, and I'm sure so many others, just an entirely new perspective of how to look at the world, and that's just invaluable.
Well, say thanks so much for creating this for creating this energy station, which you created here, and allowed us to bring up these energies and let them go in the world to do what they decide to do.
Amen. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.